This week in Texas, we sit down with Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo for a conversation about her time in office and what she wants to accomplish before the end of 2026. And we speak with two Democrats running for lieutenant governor. Plus, Nick Notario interviews Texas Education Agency Chief Mike Morath about the future of HISD. And we have the results of a new survey that tells us how voters are thinking heading into the March primary this week in Texas. Hello again, I'm Tom Abrams. This week in Texas, we do begin with that new survey from the Hobby School of Public Affairs at the University of Houston. It gives us some insight into how voters are feeling ahead of the primary, specifically about the race for U.S. Senate. This survey looked at three groups of voters: those likely to vote in the November general election, Republicans likely to vote in the primary, and Democrats likely to vote in their primary. It digs beyond the horse race in a fight for both parties' nominations. Speaking of fighter, that is one of the qualities the survey measured among the 5 best-funded Senate candidates. On the Republican side, Ken Paxton is seen as most likely to fight among his supporters and the least likely to compromise. John Cornyn supporters see him as most likely to compromise but less of a fighter. Wesley Hunt is viewed as the most honest among his supporters.
While overall there weren't much differences between the candidates, it was pretty much the same qualities for everyone. Where we did see a difference in both primaries was that Republican primary voters who wanted a fighter as their candidate turned more to Ken Paxton, and Democratic voters who wanted a fighter as their candidate turned more to Jasmine Crockett.
Crockett as seen as the more likely fighter among supporters, Tallarico as more honest. They're equally viewed as less likely to compromise. And both are viewed favorably by all likely Democrat voters in Texas. Crockett at 85% and Tallarico at 79%. On the Republican side, the unfavorables are higher, though a majority see all candidates in favorable light.
Unlike the case in the Republican primary, where a third of Republican primary voters don't like Cornyn and a quarter don't like Paxton, on the Democratic side, Democratic primary voters like Jasmine Crockett and they like James Tallarico. Fewer than 1 in 10 has a negative opinion of the two candidates.
Now let's turn to the race for lieutenant governor. Republican Dan Patrick is the overwhelming favorite to win a 4th term in office as a Republican, but not without a challenge from Democrats. We spoke with 2 of the 3 Democrats on the March primary ballot. You'll hear from State Representative Vikki Goodwin in a moment. But first, here's our conversation with Marcos Velez.
I'm running for lieutenant governor because I remember what the world was like when I came out of high school. It was a world of infinite opportunity here in the state of Texas. I graduated, I was able to get a really good paying job in the oil industry. Homes were very affordable. You could buy a super nice pickup truck for about $30,000. And now I look at the world that my son has graduated into with a college degree. He delivers pizzas. The cost of living has soared. My neighbors are being priced out of their homes by their property taxes. We have public schools that are not being funded. Teaching is no longer a respected career. It's treated more like a part-time job by the people that choose how they're going to fund our school system, and really they've lost all kinds of respect for public servants. And so I think we need a drastic change, and I think if we keep doing the same thing over and over again and electing the same people, we're just going to continue to slide backwards.
So tell me about your political experience.
Sure. Very actively involved in politics from the standpoint of I work for a major labor organization, the United Steelworkers. Every year we work on crafting legislation that's pro-worker, pro-family. We push that legislation by finding friendly members to move the bills either through the House or the Senate. Unfortunately, for the last at least decade, we've watched the majority of that legislation either stall in some committee or never see the light of day. And so, you know, very experienced in how the process works. I've never run for political office myself.
But you felt like you needed to do something.
Yes, sir.
And that's because of your own personal experience, because of what you see your neighbors going through?
Yeah, so I believe when you look at politics as a whole, I think government was intended to be for the people, by the people. I think we've lost touch with that. Most of our representatives, they're career politicians. They're people that don't live in our communities. They're people that when the lights go out, they're not there sitting in the dark and in the cold with us. And so, look, I think if we want working people issues and middle class issues to be addressed, then we have to have people that actually live in those tax brackets.
So lieutenant governor is arguably the most powerful position in the state because the lieutenant governor controls the legislation that moves through the Senate. Is that why you chose that job? Knowing the process as you do, you wanted to find the job that
could actually affect change immediately?
I did. Look, I had zero interest in beating my head against the wall. You have people that would suggest a different route. But again, understand how the process works. And I believe that instead of complaining about what I don't like, I should step out there and actually take action to change it.
How's your message being received?
It's been very warmly received. You know, the majority of the union members that I deal with on a daily basis, they come across the entire political spectrum. We have Republicans, Independents, Democrats, we have socialists. And so when you talk to these people at these different job sites, everyone agrees that the cost of living has soared out of control. Everyone agrees that that schools should be funded. Everyone agrees that property taxes have become just this unbearable nightmare for homeowners in Texas. People agree that the minimum wage is ridiculously low and no one can survive on $7.25 an hour. And so we're talking about issues that impact everyday people. We're not talking about these vague and ambiguous political policies that the average Texan could care less about.
And it's being received how?
Very well. A lot of support. Really, I mean, have more volunteers than we know what to do with right now, which is a good problem to have. But look, people they're motivated. They want something different. And I think when we finish this primary race, you know, people will be able to see how well the message was received just by the amount of support we get.
And what do you want people to know about you? Given that your name recognition statewide would seem to be a challenge.
Yes, sir.
What do you want people to know?
It'd be awesome if people go to my website, velezfortexas.com, and see what we're actually running for. I'm a normal, everyday guy. I live in the community. You're likely to catch me laying up in my driveway working on one of my cars. I mean, people that know me really well know that I like coaching kids' sports. I value my family. I value my community, and that's why I'm running. I'm running because I understand that working people, normal, everyday citizens have been left behind. And again, I mean, we have to shift the focus back onto things that actually matter to the people that are worried about the bills they can't pay, to the people that are worried about the future for their children, to the people that are worried about their community safety.
You mentioned your website. I notice on your website you talk about jobs, but
Yes,
most
sir.
politicians don't know much about actually creating jobs. You feel like you do?
I do. I do that every single day. I bargain with multinational corporations, and you don't walk in and sit down with a corporation that has a higher annual revenue than the state's biannual budget, and they just say, yeah, well, we're going to add a whole lot of people to the workforce. I mean, that comes through, you know, tough negotiations. But again, when you create jobs, those people take that money they earn, they spend it in the economy, and that money benefits all. For every one job you take out of the Texas economy, our union has done studies, it has a 7 to 8-fold impact. So you may take out one permanent job, you affect 2 contractors, you're going to affect the guy that sells donuts on the corner, the guy that sells lunch, and so there's a ripple effect. And if you look throughout the state of Texas, we have suffered a loss of industrial, manufacturing, and service industry jobs for as long as I can remember. And so I know a lot about creating jobs. I understand the benefits it can bring to the community, and it's the direction that we need to head in.
Thanks to Marcos Velez. When we come back, a conversation with another Democrat running for lieutenant governor, Vikki Goodwin. I'm now joined by Vikki Goodwin. She is a candidate for lieutenant governor of the state of Texas. Thanks so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you, Tom.
Tell us why you want to be lieutenant governor.
After 30 years of Republican leadership, it is time for change. I support our public schools. Our current leadership does not. Our current leadership is more interested in putting the 10 Commandments on the classroom wall instead of resources into the classroom. We also have a broken healthcare system. I want to fix that. I want to address housing affordability and water issues. And so I just think it's time for change.
The current lieutenant governor has been in office for some time. It is a very powerful position. He has a lot of money. How do you expect to beat Dan Patrick?
He does have a lot of money, and I think we also need campaign finance reform. But to beat him will be a grassroots effort. We just saw in North Texas Taylor Ramett flip a Senate seat. I think people are tired of what's happening here in the state and the U.S. with our current leadership. So I think that we have a real opportunity in 2026.
So I'll ask you about that. Given that Democrats have not won a statewide seat in so long, does the win in Senate District 9 maybe boost Democrats' hopes going into 2026?
Absolutely. I think that win up in Fort Worth and Tarrant County gives us a lot of hope. Hopefully people will see that and say, my vote will count. I am going to turn out in 2026 because I believe that we need different leadership.
So Lieutenant Governor controls a lot of what happens in Austin. What would be your top priority if you were to have the gavel in the Senate?
My top priority is our public education system. I believe public education is foundational to people having opportunities. You know, we often hear that pay has not kept up with inflation, and people are stressed about just paying regular bills, much less buying homes and doing all the things that we feel like we should be able to do on our salaries. And so I think having a strong education system, increasing the minimum wage, addressing our affordability issues like health care. So many people don't have insurance and will put off going to see the doctor. We should be putting more emphasis on preventive care, which is less expensive than waiting until you end up in the emergency room.
Would you advocate for an expansion of Medicaid?
I would advocate for an expansion of Medicaid, but honestly, I think we should come up with our own system here in Texas. And the reason I say that is that in talking to doctors, Medicaid often doesn't pay in a very timely manner. Oftentimes it doesn't cover the cost of care, and sometimes they even claw it back. The application process is incredibly difficult. I'd like to come up with our own Texas plan.
As far as education is concerned, it being your top priority, the applications for people to apply for educational savings accounts or vouchers is now open for the first time in Texas. Is that something that you would try to claw back, education savings accounts?
What I would do is I would not put any money in our budget towards private schools. So unfunding or defunding this voucher program, yes, that is one of my top priorities.
What about property taxes? What do you do about that? I know that the lieutenant governor has a plan, the governor has another plan. It's been, even though there has been movement on property taxes, it's been somewhat contentious, especially given the funding to public schools.
Right. Well, you know, I'm on appropriations now. I recognize that we underspent what we could have as a state. We are very conservative. We don't allow ourselves to spend more than our revenue coming in. But this time we underspent that by $4 billion. So that's an additional $4 billion we could have put into our public schools, and when the state is a better partner in sharing the financial costs, then that takes it takes the pressure off of our locals, the school district, the city, and the county, and that will make a difference on property taxes.
So you think actually giving more money to the districts then lessens the likelihood that they would then raise their rates, putting a greater burden on homeowners?
Absolutely. You know, the state has decreased its share of school funding over the years from 45% to now somewhere around 35%. If we move the state share up, that takes the pressure off local.
Anything else you'd like to add that I didn't think to ask you about?
I can't think of anything else.
Well, that's good. So education being your top priority, and also health care.
Absolutely. We need to fund our public schools, and we need to make sure people can access the health care they need.
Vikki Goodwin, a Democrat running for lieutenant governor, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
And This Week in Texas, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo is in the final year of her second term in office. Though she's not running for re-election, she still has work to finish and an agenda to accomplish. Judge Hidalgo now joins me to look back on her last 7 years and ahead toward the final 11 months of your being the top elected administrator in the nation's third largest county. I know one thing that has defined your time in office are emergencies. Talk about what you've learned about emergency response.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And absolutely, I mean, it's defined all of our lives for the past 8 years. So many emergencies. One thing I've learned is just how resilient the community is, how much we like to help each other. Also, the importance of being not just prepared, not just rehearsing, but realizing that leadership is part of emergency response. So, for example, we've created a new system so that people can volunteer more easily after a disaster strikes, a unified system where all the nonprofits feed in, and then people can come in and help. We have improved our shelter systems. We saw them work very well in this past cold weather event. We have been able to create during the emergencies the ability for people all around the region to call a single number for needs that are not 911 level. So there's always pieces that you can think about that are not about putting out the fire, so to speak. And I'm proud of the fact that we've learned all to work together very closely to the point that folks at the Emergency Operations Center who are new say, you guys are just such close friends and collaborators. We've learned to work together during an emergency and when there's not an emergency.
Do you feel like Harris County is and has been sort of a model for how to respond to emergencies, large and small, given both the petrochemical industry along the coastline, hurricanes, freezes?
I mean, look, people come from around the country to see our operations. It's effective, it's efficient, it's impressive. It's hard to say you've reached sort of model status when, by definition, an emergency is going to negatively impact people. And no matter how well we do, there are going to be people whose lives are going to be turned upside down. And so I struggle to say, we got to where we need to be. But I think that we are on the cutting edge given the level of risk we have in our area. Do I wish we had fewer chemical fires? Do I wish we had fewer, hurricanes? And of course, but look, I think as far as the tenets of emergency response and our equipment and the design of our area and our relationships, we're very strong.
Yeah, responding to emergencies is very expensive. Harris County has been strapped financially. Looking back and looking forward, your thoughts about the county's budget and its ability to meet the basic needs of Harris County residents?
So let's talk about flooding, right? Hurricane season is going to be here before we know it. All of us are, have a little bit of trauma when it comes to flooding. And so think about the flood control projects that we're building and how important they are for, obviously, to prevent flooding. So one thing I found out just a few months ago is that some 26 or 24 of the flood control projects that people voted for in 2018 are stopped indefinitely. That is, the bond that people voted for is not enough. Well, maybe inflation and the cost of engineering services for one reason or another. But see, there's a structural issue as well when it comes to the budget and the way the county does business writ large. If you're a company or government, you do some sort of bidding to let contracts. There's a lot of contracts, hundreds of millions of dollars each year, that are let by the flood control district. Same thing with the engineering department, but let's focus on flood control, where this process is basically waived. Since the 70s, our predecessors decided that they would waive the proper bidding process for these massive set of contracts. And so it's almost hard to believe, but what we realized a couple years ago by the independent auditor done report to any of us politicians is that the contracts are being let without any kind of bidding, selection criteria, selection committee, nothing in writing. I mean, somebody called somebody. And so we, last year, as a commissioner's court, we voted to implement those processes, came back and found out the flood control district had not implemented them yet. And
the state's been critical of that too.
Right, it's a real problem. I mean, it's a real problem. And so what I'm advocating for, and I think what can have the most impact of anything I can do this year, and it's not sexy, I'm not going to be able to run on this in the future, is removing that waiver, sending all the contracts back to the independent department that lets out all the other contracts, because that's how it is in every other county, large county, small county. We couldn't find one that did it this way. In fact, they didn't believe us at first. So that, when we talk about my final year, what I want to do, that's my most important goal, because it has to do with cost savings. It has to do with the proper use of taxpayer dollars, and it has real impacts. How many more flood control projects could we be doing if we had a system to bid and let out these contracts? So
as we talk about these final 11 months, is that your top priority?
Yeah, I mean, emergencies are always the top priority, emergencies, public safety, but outside of that, yes, and it's something that we can achieve, but the only way to achieve it is with public attention. The only reason we voted as a court a couple years ago to have a process, which of course was not implemented, that's why we need to remove that waiver, is because there was public attention on the matter. people just watching, following up, tracking this story. And so that's why I'm here today, is I want to begin talking about it again, to where us politicians have no choice but to sort of tie our own hands and stop awarding contracts in a way that is inappropriate and in a way that is without precedent anywhere else.
You think you'll be able to get that done?
I hope so. I think it really depends on the public. If it's something that goes quietly, there's no incentive. There's no incentives for the Commissioner's Court to tie their own hands. But of course, I think it can be done if it's something that I'm trying to work towards. I'm going to do my best to get that done.
One last question for you. The time flies when we're having these conversations, and that's about Harris County and its political bent. The county commission has a supermajority of Democrats at the moment. Governor Greg Abbott has committed to spending some $25 million, if not more, to turn Harris County red. Your thoughts about that heading into 2026, even though you're not on the ballot?
Well, we've had really interesting midterms. 2018, and then we had, of course, 2022, and then we're looking at this year. I think if trends are anything to go by, we shouldn't see a major shift. But I've made a little bit of a comment about the judges race, and we say there's a supermajority of Democrats, but I think some people run as a Democrat. We saw this with Kim Mogg, and so what I tell my team on the political side is, well, let's at least let Greg Abbott spend the money. Let's not choose a Republican-like candidate to run for the office of the county judge, because at that point, well, we're saving him the $20 million or $40 million. But I think people are so committed on sort of my side of the aisle to push back. They already were before, but now with these terrible attacks on people, that you just cannot possibly ignore the arrest of the little boy, the killing of these two adults by ICE. I think it's really gotten people mobilized, and it's turned off a lot of other folks. And of course, I'm going to be doing everything I can to campaign for the whole Democratic ticket.
Great. Judge Lina Hidalgo, thanks so much for your time. As always, we appreciate it. When we come back, our Nick Notario reports on the future of HISD and how long the state's control of that district might last. This week in Texas, Houston ISD, the state's largest school district, announced plans to close 12 campuses at the end of the academic year. Superintendent Mike Miles cites declining enrollment and infrastructure problems as contributing factors. But the announcement came as a surprise to many because he told the faculty in November that no campuses would close next school year. Critics say transparency issues are a symptom of the state takeover of the district. HISD is still under state control and governed by an appointed board of managers. ABC 13's Nick Notario spoke with the commissioner of the Texas Education Agency, who says a gradual transition back to local control is on track.
At a Fort Bend Regional Partnership event, TA Commissioner Mike Morath spoke about the future of education, a long-term plan he says is focused on good teachers, strong leaders, and quality curriculum. But when it comes to the state's largest school district, Morath's focus isn't only long-term.
This is always meant to be a short intervention to help reform the school so that it served better the students that it was not serving before. And by all measures, that appears to be working.
Nearly 3 years ago, the state took over HISD. It removed local elected control on the Board of Trustees and installed a state-appointed Board of Managers to select a superintendent. Last summer, Morath extended the takeover until 2027. He told us that plan is still on track.
By the 4-year anniversary, then I announce this is the timeline for return to local electoral control.
Morath is still vague on exactly what the timeline will look like. The TEA says it involved a transition period of at least 3 years where elected board members return, but not all at once. Houston Federation of Teachers Union President Jackie Anderson says they're still waiting.
We don't have anything in writing because they have not been very transparent with what this would look like or how this would occur.
Anderson says she agrees it's time to transition to elected leaders, but isn't confident it'll happen next year.
I'm always skeptical until I see it happen because we have heard so many things.
A future Morath believes is better for HISD because of the takeover, but union leaders say it shouldn't have happened to begin with.
The improvements that have happened in Houston ISD is probably the largest academic turnaround in the history of the United States. It's pretty incredible.
When you handpick people and you turn out the story you want to turn out, of course. But I always say, that's good. You think it's good, everything is fine, that means you can get out quicker.
Nick also reached out to HISD after speaking with Morath, and in a statement, a spokesperson told him that since the start of the takeover, the district eliminated all F-rated campuses and will work with the TEA on what's next to ensure long-term success. And that does it for This Week in Texas. We certainly appreciate you being with us. For all of us here, have a great week and be kind to one another.